You're listening to 88.7 WLUW Chicago Sound Alliance, recording live from the campus of Loyola University. It's Live from the Heartland featuring Katy, Hogan, and Thom Clark. Today, our guests are journalist Monroe Anderson and Iris Waichler, author on aging. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
And we are back with Live from the Heartland. What was just playing there?
Little Ruben Gonzalez,
Tres Lindas Cubanos.
the Cuban music rage of a few years back, where we heard all these old jazz musicians. I believe that Mr. Gonzalez is no longer with us, but Ry Cooder deserves credit for kind of bringing some of these old guys literally out of the woodwork in some cases, and just a wonderful slice of traditional 50s style jazz.
Iris Waichler, welcome to Live from the Heartland.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're thanking Michael for reaching out to you. You and Michael connected first.
That's right.
I think. Had you sent him your book, or did you guys have another connection?
I contacted him. He asked me to send the book, and then
There we are.
As he said, I'm getting old. I need to hear about this stuff.
So what we're talking about is a book called Role Reversal: How to Take Care of Yourself and Your Aging Parents.
Right.
So, tell us how it came about, briefly.
I was originally writing a book about my father. My father was a great man, but by society's standards was not considered a great person. He had a high school education, and he was a junk man. But he was a wonderful, wonderful guy, a great father. And as I started to write his life story, I realized he was a caregiver from the time he was a little boy, because his parents didn't step up. So he took care of his brothers, and in fact, his parents came to live with us. I grew up in a household full of relatives that came to live with us, so that was the environment I grew up in. I wrote the book. I started to write the book, and people would ask me a lot of times about what I was doing, and then they would start telling me stories about taking care of their moms or their dads or their aunts, and it became really clear to me that the book needed to be more than about my dad, and I needed to use my 40-year background as a medical social worker to share information and sort of a map or guidelines for people who are caregivers, because there's just so many of them out there right now.
More all the time, right?
Well, the numbers right now range from 40 to 45 million, and those numbers are growing.
And now, does that number include everything from family members who wind up in the caregiving position to professionals who come into homes or are serving people in other situations like hospice, etc.?
It includes everybody, but the majority of caregivers right now are women, 65%, not surprising. They're about 49 years old. They're taking care of a 69-year-old relative. They have a full-time job. They are a parent with children, and they are married. And they do it for about 4 years.
Wow.
So imagine the stress and juggling all those balls and trying to do it with some sense of success.
Your book is filled with great advice and very practical questions for families to share with each other to figure out where people are at. How do you think your sharing of your dad's war journal helps other readers connect with your own story? I mean, all these stories have some similarities, but they're each unique in their own way because of the personalities involved. So why do you think your thread of sharing his war journal, as I call it, works for readers to understand the other topics you're trying to get through?
That's a great question, and you're the first person to ask that. Thank you for asking.
We're
that, Tom.
known for that here.
You know what I was trying to do? I always do research before I write a book, and I didn't find any books that had the story of the person being taken care of and the caregiver. And so it was really important to me to write this book together with my dad. And also, I wanted people to know him through his own words, not just mine. And so that was why I included his little autobiography in his words. His story about the war was really important to me because it showed the kind of person that he was.
Yeah.
I also think the greatest generation isn't heralded enough. I think they're so important, and they're dying every day. We're losing them, and I wanted to include that story in the book. And in the stories he tells about the war, you also see that he was a caregiver with his men. And so that was another reason I included that.
It gave a whole breadth, width, and expansiveness to the story, to the book that was really appreciated.
Oh, that's great to hear.
No,
Thank you, Katie.
I like that Thom asked that question. Could you summarize a few of the main points along your checklist to cope with memory loss, for example? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Well, in terms of memory loss, there are a lot of things that people can do to cope with it. And one of the things that you need to be aware of is you want to be consistent. You want to have things done same time, same way every day. And if there are multiple caregivers, you need to make sure that people are communicating about what to do.
Right.
It's also important for people who have memory issues to give them cues. So writing things down is really important. Reminding them about things, reminding them who you are, reminding them about what's going to happen during the day, saying we're going to get dressed before they get dressed. As many cues and clues as you can give them so they know how to sort of what to expect, and also breaking things down into very small, manageable steps is very important too.
Right.
Just daily tasks can be so overwhelming and so confusing for someone who has a memory issue. So they need that help. And another thing is we tend to rush people because time is at a premium. And one of the toughest things about being a caregiver is the whole notion of patience.
Slow down.
Slow down, take the time, give them the time to do what they need to do. And patience is a huge component of that.
Yeah. I felt grateful for the time with my mother in her last years, for the slowness of it. I mean, it was not a problem for me to go in there and start out by saying, "It's Katie, Mom." And she would always say, "Oh, I know." And I think people like my mother, real smart older people, as they get older and things start slipping away, they are incredibly great pretenders. You know, they'll pretend until they catch up.
They're very good at pretending.
Oh, my goodness.
And so that's a really good point. I view it as a privilege to be a caregiver. It was an honor for me to take care of my dad. It was an honor for me to work with patients of mine who were dying. And there's an intimacy to that is indescribable, but those moments, those end-of-life moments can be so precious, and those are the memories that I take with me and that I share. And I think a lot of people are afraid of those moments, and our society doesn't encourage talking about death and dying, doesn't talk about those issues. And my hope is that one of my goals of my book was to help people begin to look at those issues, not be afraid of them, because opening that door can open so many other doors and strengthen relationships in meaningful and unimaginable ways.
A lot of your book is talking about what you do if dad or mom can't live at home anymore or can't move in with you or relatives are across the country. So you begin looking at independent living, assisted living. We have all sorts of interesting names for levels of care.
Right.
It's quite amazing. Your book is a great roadmap to explain some of those things. But what advice do you have for families that are looking for other help to deal with the sticker shock? This is expensive care that most of us aren't really prepared for when it finally happens.
My first piece of advice is you want to be proactive. You don't want to wait till someone's sick and you're in the middle of a crisis and you're not knowing what you have to work with. So if there's one message I want to give people today when they leave, have a conversation with your senior loved ones now while they're healthy. And that conversation should include, I love you and I care about you and I want to help you age with dignity and I want you to have the help you need. And that includes talking about what insurance they have, what financial resources they have. Do they want to age in place at home? What are they open to? Do you want family to take care of you? Do you want professionals to take care of you? And so a piece of that is getting to know what the finances are available, what insurance is available, what resources they have, and putting that together in terms of a caregiver plan.
Your work before writing this book, and is this your first book?
It's my third book.
Third book, right.
Yeah.
I thought had a couple before. Your other work was as a medical social worker?
Correct. I worked at what was Evanston Hospital for many years. I worked at Rush.
So, this comes from a deep well in you of experience and observation. Can you talk about how well or poorly we as a culture are dealing with aging and the gift that it could be for folks?
Yeah, we are so far behind other countries in terms of our thoughts about aging and the culture of aging. It's important to respect people that are older. I love my neighborhood on my block. There's multi-generational families on my block. I think there's so much to be learned from that. I heard Kubler-Ross speak, and she talked about the importance. She was in an environment where daycare kids were living with seniors, and they interacted daily, and each learned so much from the other. It's such precious gifts to be shared.
Yeah.
And I so wish that our culture would move in that direction more and more. We're not there yet. We're not even close.
How can you speak in terms of this multi-generational dynamic to those of us who are in between, dealing with both aging parents and younger kids?
What you're talking about is the sandwich generation, which so many of us are in, and it's a blessing and it's a challenge, because at the same time you're taking care of your aging parent, you're trying to be a parent to your kids.
Or a grandparent.
And juggling all that is really can be really, really tough. But I think the key to it is helping everyone be comfortable with each other and learning what gifts each generation has to share. And it can be so important, so meaningful. There are studies that show that when you have seniors that are with little kids, those seniors
thrive.
They do great. They
Yes.
live longer, they're healthier, they're happier, and those kids love the joy of being around the seniors. There's
Yeah.
many senior, nursing home programs and senior programs where they do promote that exchange, and I think that's the best ideal scenario.
With the kids, they don't have to remember anything.
No.
They can be in the moment,
Well,
just the way the kids are.
And the beauty of little kids, they don't judge like us
Right,
adults do. They don't
right.
have preconceived ideas.
Yeah.
And so then it becomes normal for them. So they're not as afraid.
Well, what would you see as one of the better things that we as a culture could do to support moving into a more enlightened handling of our aging, all of us aging? And that's both personal and, do macro and micro, whatever you like.
Well, I think if we had about 12 years, we could talk about our healthcare system, which
Yeah.
is
Right.
such a disaster. That's the
Incredible.
heart of it.
We have a health business. I'm not sure about the care part.
That's right. That's right. I think we need to make more opportunities, affordable opportunities available for people to help take care of their loved ones. Also, more of us are aging. There are not enough programs available for us boomers, and so you can bet there's going to be a lot more options available as the boomers get older, and many of the boomers are the policymakers.
Right.
So we're going to be seeing more choices, but my fear is that those choices are not going to be equal in terms of opportunity for everybody.
Sure.
We need to have more programs that are affordable, more places where people can go for help, that if they want to age in place, more affordable help at home. One of the things that's available to help people that people don't really know about are geriatric care managers. And I talk about that in my book. And that's really a go-between person that can come in and can assess what the senior needs. They can act as an advocate for them. They'll even go to a nursing home or an assisted care place with you. If you have a loved one who's not close by geographically, you can contact them and have them do an assessment. And that's not free. Insurance doesn't cover it, but it can be a one session. It's an individual care plan depending on the needs. And that money, I think, is so well spent because that person is an expert in senior needs. They can help find the best, strongest, most appropriate program for your loved one locally. And they're always available to come back and kind of assess things and see where things are at. I think that's another mistake that a lot of people make. They set up a plan and they don't revisit it. So a person becomes a caregiver and they're burned out and no one checks in with them to see how things are going. So I think when people do make caregiver plans and things do happen, a part of that plan should be let's check in 3 weeks or a month and see where everything's at, what things are working, what things aren't, where are there gaps, and how do we fill them.
We're talking with Iris Waichler, and her book is Role Reversal, How to Take Care of Yourself and Your Aging Parents. I'd like you to talk a little bit about the first part of your subtitle. How do we take care of ourselves better while we're going through this other work with our parents?
I think next to not planning ahead, not taking care of ourselves is the worst mistake we make as caregivers. And particularly since so many women are caregivers, we're so good at taking care of other people, not so much with ourselves. And so what we need to do is pay attention to what's going on with our bodies and what's going on with our minds as we're caregivers. So things like GI problems, headaches, anxiety, short-temperedness, high frustration level, not wanting to get out of bed, drinking too much, eating too much, not eating enough. All those kinds of things are things you need to pay attention to as a caregiver because those are signs that you're burned out. And so, and you don't want to get to the point where all of those things are happening before you get help because, again, that's a crisis situation.
Right.
So one of the things you do is you have that check-in plan as a caregiver where you see where things are at. You have a backup plan, so you figure out who else is going to come in and give you respite care so that you have some time. You have to, as a caregiver, incorporate time for yourself to do things that you enjoy, that nourish you, that help you rest. And it can be something as little as taking a bath or taking a walk. It can be something more comprehensive like having another person come in and relieve you and take care or taking a short break or vacation. The other thing that you can do as a caregiver that people don't always think about is incorporating things that you love to do as a part of your role as a caregiver. So, for example, if you like to dance, then when you're taking care of someone, put on some music.
Yeah.
And if that person can dance, get up and dance. If you like to sing. And those are really great things because if you play music that the person you're taking care of loved, that's reminiscing. That helps bring back those memories. And those can be some of the most joyful, meaningful times of your life as a caregiver and with the person that you're taking care of. So incorporating things like that. Maybe it's having a meal that you really like, food that you like, or sitting in a garden looking at beautiful flowers, whatever. Those kinds of things sound little, but they make a huge, huge
All
difference.
that's left at the end is little.
That's right. Every moment. A
Yeah.
little moment can mean so much.
What has concentrating on this area of work and life itself done to inside of your head to say, this is what I definitely don't want, this is what I definitely want as I grow towards the end of this life?
Yeah, that's a great question, Katie. I think for me, the preciousness of life is so profound because I've worked with so many people who said, when I'm in my 70s, I want to do this. And so I've lived my life where I don't do that. I've traveled. I did all these things I wanted to do all through my life, so I don't have any regrets in that way. I've had conversations with my family, with my husband about what I want done. And I also am conscious about not wanting to be a burden on my family either. So I'm not going to say, I don't want to say to them, you are the only person that can take care of me. I want to widen the spectrum.
Excellent.
I think that's super important.
That is a really good point.
Yeah.
Because everybody is not meant a great caregiver.
It's a recipe for disaster if the person that's taking care of you doesn't want to take care of you and can't take care of you.
Right.
That's lose-lose for everybody.
And surprises happen. People that you didn't expect at the end of someone's life pop up to be there
That's
for
right.
that person. And I think you need to be open to surprises in the last decade or so of life to see who appears. I mean, every time you go to a memorial service, the family is generally sincerely thanking A, B, and C caregiver.
Right.
These names come up. They say, and we really want to thank Althea, as we did for my mom, and the kind of care that she gave her. These are people you didn't know 2 years before, 3 years before, and they become the most important people in your parents' life.
Absolutely. And the angels of hospice and programs like that
Bingo.
that come in,
Yeah.
who are perfect strangers when they open the door and you are hugging and crying in their arms,
Yep.
many times along the way and at the end.
Yep.
For me, too, in answer to your question, Thom, I think, too, I've learned a lot about having those conversations about why the people in my life that are important to me are important to me. I don't put that off. And I also live in the moment. When I have a great moment, I enjoy every second of it. I'm very attuned to everything that's going around, and those moments are really precious, and I want to capture them and live in them and enjoy every second of it.
Your book is not quite memoir, and it's not quite advice book. It kind of weaves them together. I'm wondering if there have been changes or new developments in the field that you worked in professionally, and then you did this very personal story with chock full of advice. Are there things that have changed in the last few years since you first sat down to research this that was an aha moment for you, or something that you wish you had been able to put in the book?
You know, I was thinking about that. That's a great question. I think I would have put more information about the finances and the health, the insurance part. But then the other side of the coin is, who knows where the heck we're going to be on the insurance end.
You don't want to date the book too much.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but in answer to your question, I have to say I don't think there have been that many revolutionary changes since I wrote the book. It came out in 2016. I think we're pretty much where we were. Mm-hmm. I know what I hope will happen. I think I've said that, but we're not anywhere near.
We need
them.
to have the talk, and we need to have it earlier.
Absolutely.
That's really one of the basic things I pulled out.
Yeah.
And you have great advice about how to have the talk.
Yeah.
Whether it's moving or taking away the keys. I hate to put it that way. Driving. I should say driving.
Oh, yeah, like the keys for driving, yeah. But I think the talk isn't as hard as we think it is. And so the hardest part, I mean, next to talking to your parents about sex, talking to them about their money or talking to them about death and dying, that's on the list of things conversations you never want to have with your parents. And so even something like, you don't even be direct about it. You can say, I went to the doctor today, and it got me thinking about you and Dad. I love you both. I want to be there for you when you need me. I want to know how you want to age in place, and I want to know what I can do to make it meaningful for you. Things like that. The door is open, and they can visit that time anytime they want. That may not be the conversation that changes things, but you've opened a door that you can revisit in the future.
Iris Waichler, the book is Role Reversal, How to Take Care of Yourself and Your Aging Parents. People can get it everywhere and on the big monopoly that people get their books from.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
They can just ask their bookstores to order it if it's not in a bookstore.
Nice work, Iris.
Thank you so much.
Timely work.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming on Live from the Heartland.
Been a pleasure.
And we want to thank Monroe Anderson for joining us as well. Next week, we're going to have one of our own here from WLUW, Bob Marovitz, the guy who follows us in this hour, will be our guest talking about his new book. And we've got the music director from BET and the incredible production of Mahalia coming on next week. Very exciting. We're going to go out with Swimming to the Other Side by Pat Humphries. We want to thank everyone who makes this show possible. Lynn Orman, Jake Levy, Michelle Song, Michael James, and we urge you to do good
in the world. The world needs all the good you do. All power to the people.
Vote.